So now that we've analyzed the deer hunt scene pretty thoroughly, I want to move to another topic that's connected to the same issue of now the nude hunters themselves on the front side. So I'm going to make an iconographic comparison of Rama and Lakshman to Heracles as well as the Letoids, that is, the children of the mother Leto in Greek mythology, Apollo and Artemis. So yeah, I'll just quote from Raffaella Bonato in La Culla de Hermes, page 216. She writes that nudity and the attribute of the bow appear together within the corpus only for Heracles in relation to the episode of Alcyoneus, against whom the hero is also equipped with a club. And you see that on the bottom left here, where Heracles is holding a bow and a club and he's attacking Alcyoneus, the giant demon, who's looking pretty shocked. So she's already making a comparison to Heracles because of the nudity and the attribute of the bow to the two nude hunters, which are Rama and Lakshman. So she continues and says, if then we consider the iconographic scheme and adopt a structural perspective of permutation, the placement of the figures on the hydria number 2 corresponds to the pursuit of Tityos by the Letoids, who strike the giant armed with bows. So that's the number 12 hydria, in which Apollo and Artemis are also using their bow and arrows to attack Tityos, the demon. So the Letoids are another word for Apollo and Artemis, the siblings. So these two heroes, Apollo and Artemis, are analogous to the two heroes Rama and Lakshman, and she's recognizing that they're, the structure of the both scenes is basically the same, where Tityos is being striked with the bow and arrows by two siblings, as well as the two siblings Rama and Lakshman are striking the golden deer with their arrows. So they recognize the similarity, and it's pretty obvious because of these similarities that the nude youths must be great heroes, just like Apollo and Artemis or Heracles. It's just a natural conclusion that one should make. And just another point that I want to make, if you look at the images on the bottom for comparison, you can see that the action is from right to left in both the number 12 and the number 2 hydria, where the hunters are stationed on the right side and they are looking at their target, who is fleeing on the left. In the case of Artemis and Apollo, it's Tityos who's on the far left, looking back at them, and then in the number 2 hydria, of course, it's the golden stag Maricha, who is looking back at the two hunters, Rama and Lakshman. On the bottom right, you have two images. One of them is a zoomed in photo of the second hunter, which is probably Lakshman. And so, yeah, just for your information. So to continue our discussion about the two nude young male heroes, Rama and Lakshman, if we see the image here as well, this is another Indian painting, and you can see how the two young brothers are very close to naked, whereas Rama's wife, Sita, is very well dressed in red, and that is something that accords with the Caeretan hydria as well, because on the back side of the Caeretan hydria number 2, the author Hemmelrich has noted the elaborate dress of both Maenads, both of whom are Sita. So it's very clear that the hydria and this Indian depiction, they're both very much symmetrical in terms of the dress of all three characters. The following quote may be the most important quote in the entire presentation regarding the Caeretan hydria number 2 in Boston. In it, Raffaella Bonado, in her book La Culla de Hermes, page 217, writes, "In light of this network of relationships that can be established with respect to the criteria for selecting iconographies within the corpus, the two hunters in the Boston deer hunt seem to be evoking a particular status with respect to the others, which cannot be defined exactly and which does not necessarily correspond to a mythical tale not otherwise attested." Now, there's a lot of negatives in this quote: not necessarily correspond, not otherwise attested, cannot be defined, and it indicates that the author is very non-committal, but is willing to nonetheless admit that this may be the mythical tale of the Ramayana being attested, and that the two hunters are evoking a particular status with respect to other figures on other hydriae, as we have mentioned, including Apollo and Artemis and Heracles. So she recognizes the network of relationships that can be established based on the iconographies compared to other hydriae. So and based on that, she realizes that it definitely could be a mythical tale, but she's non-committal about it, and especially because it hasn't been otherwise attested, at least in her eyes. But as we have seen with the Campana plaques, they are otherwise attested. That is why I have titled this slide with the question, "Mythical Tale of Ramayana Not Attested?" And interestingly, the Louvre Museum in Paris has made a similar statement as Bonado has here about the Campana panels, which we will see on the next slide. These scholars have made the same error in labeling both the Caeretan hydria number 2 and the Campana series as generic or unidentifiable scenes. They often only publish the image of the lone figure at a fire altar, which is one of the Campana plaques, which we will be seeing on the next slide, because it is the hardest among the Campana plaques to pinpoint in terms of the mythological story and the identity of the character, which is probably Bharat from the Valmiki Ramayana, in my opinion. The Campana slabs, which are currently kept in the Louvre Museum in Paris, France, are also said to have inconclusive mythological interpretations, just like the Caeretan hydria in Boston. And in an archived article titled "Campana Slab Man Before an Altar," a French scholar at the Louvre gives us this following commentary, much like Raffaella Bonado did about the hydria earlier. They say that the significance of the decoration and the exact identification of the subjects represented by these paintings, that is the Campana plaques, are still causing controversy today. But what kind of controversy? Controversy because they're not Greek in origin and Oriental instead? I mean, for them, the definition of controversy in Western Europe seems to be anything that's non-European in origin or Oriental. And this is, again, a very good example of the xenophobia that's blatantly there in many of their comments and works. And then the next point, the scholar at the Louvre adds, the location in which the Campana slabs, that is, were discovered does not allow us to conclude that this is a strictly funerary iconography, which is correct. That's a good point. But the next thing that they say is mythological interpretations are hardly more conclusive. But as we have shown, we can definitely get to an interpretation or reach an interpretation that is very conclusive. And the last point they make is that, moreover, the 6 slabs, 5 of which, or 4 or 5 of which we are really examining, the 6th one is not actually connected to the other slabs. That is correct. But at least 4 or 5 of them are connected to one another. But even here, the author says that they do not constitute a continuous and coherent ensemble. But as I already have shown on previous slide, that I've already refuted that claim that this is not a continuous narrative and this is not a unitary narrative. That is just an incorrect claim, and it's clear that there is a very clear sequence in what we see in the Campana slabs, from the Ayodhya Kanda in terms of the Book of the Kingdom to the Book of the Forest, and then the ending where in the Book of War Rama finally rescues his wife. So we've already gone through that, and it's quite obvious that they're just simply wrong here and have not studied these plaques properly or interpreted them properly because of their xenophobia and their ignorance of Oriental myth. And the last point is that if you look at the graphic on the right here, the Campana slab in the graphic on the right is somehow less vague than the others, meaning the other three main Campana slabs that we have already discussed, according to this same scholar, even though you could argue the opposite is true. They write that the scene taking place on this slab seems more explicit somehow. A man, a priest, or simply a devout person perhaps, I don't know how that's explicit, but appears to be making a sacrifice before an altar upon which a fire is lit. And this ritual basin is resting, as you see on the upper right corner, is resting on a small column placed at the edge of the altar, adding to the religious character of the ceremony depicted. So clearly this is some kind of religious scene with a solitary person doing some kind of sacrifice. And the best interpretation I can come up with is that this character is the brother of Rama, the younger brother of Rama, Bharat, who is the son of Caere, who refuses to become the heir to the throne. He refuses the kingdom of Ayodhya, which is what his mother was trying to make happen through her devious plan. And he instead renounces the kingdom and decides to live like a hermit, just like his older brother Rama. And this is a very important and famous episode in the Ramayana as well. So there's no reason to think that this can't be positively identified, even though it is a little bit more vague because of the fact that there's only one character in it. Cultural arrogance of Western scholars is the fundamental reason why these artworks, including the Caeretan hydria in Boston and the Campana slabs in Paris, have not been identified correctly, and the reason why they continue to try and somehow insist that they could be, or perhaps could be, Greek myths, even though they clearly are not. So that's why I make this sort of a joke that no way these artworks could be depicting anything but Greek myth. I mean, how dare we even suggest such a thing, But it's not just me who's saying this. Even the classical scholars themselves acknowledge this. So we have the following quote from Nancy Thompson de Grummond, an Etruscan scholar. In her book, Etruscan Myth, Sacred History, and Legend, in the preface, she says, "For many classical scholars, Etruscan myth is to be understood as a reflection of Greek mythology, which was indeed known and influential among the Etruscans. But what is erroneous about such an approach is that there is a tendency to recognize first what is known and familiar, that is, the Greek material, and to turn away from and ignore the representations that cannot be explained easily." So in essence, they're like the golden deer. They turn away and ignore anything that's inconvenient. Anyway, if you look at the graphic on the right, we see again the same scene that we see in the Caeretan hydria depicted in Indian art. Rama, who's barefooted and practically nude, just like the nude youth in the Caeretan hydria, is hunting the stag, which has also the added black shadow of the demon Maricha. And the deer turns its head to look back at the hunter while fleeing away, which is really just the common iconography that you'll see in all of these scenes of the golden deer episode. On an earlier slide, I mentioned that the Indologist Sheldon Pollock also criticized this cultural arrogance of Western scholars when he makes the comment of the presumption of truth of a Western vision. So it's not only the Etruscan scholar here who recognizes this cultural arrogance, which leads to an interpretation of everything as being a Greek myth, but also you can see that even in the community of Indologists, they recognize this cultural arrogance as well, that pervades the entire scholarly community in the Western world. So there are many possible titles that we can give to the Caeretan hydria number 2 to name it instead of the Boston deer hunt, which is too generic. And one title I would offer as a possibility is the golden deer episode of Rama and Sita. And that would be L'episodio del cervo dorato di Rama e Sita in Italian. And so, like the title of the book, La Culla de Hermes, which means the cradle of Hermes, by the Italian author Raffaella Bonato, that title references the Caeretan hydria number 3. The title that I'm offering here as a possibility would be L'episodio del cervo dorato di Rama e Sita for Caeretan hydria number 2, and I think that would be perfect for it. It's certainly much better than the Boston deer hunt. Other possibilities would be, maybe the golden deer hunt of Rama and Sita's abduction, but that may be a little bit too long-winded. So I think that the golden deer episode of Rama and Sita is probably the best title that can be given to the Caeretan hydria number 2. To further reinforce the title that I am proposing for Caeretan hydria number 2, I am displaying below an Indian version of what you see on the Caeretan hydria. It is from central India in the 17th century AD. And if you look on the left, you see what is analogous to the front side of the Caeretan hydria, which is Rama and Laksmana with bow and arrows spotting the golden deer, Maricha. And then on the right side, what you see is analogous to what you see on the reverse side of the Caeretan hydria, especially on the leftmost side. So on this side, in this Indian painting, you see Ravan carrying Sita away with long strides across the ocean to the island of Lanka, which is, in modern day Sri Lanka is definitely an island situated south of this, close to the southern tip of India, across the Indian Ocean. So you can definitely see the parallels with the hydria, particularly the long strides of Ravan here, which are kind of mimicking what you see with him galloping with horse hooves like a centaur on the reverse side of the Boston hydria. To recap, this central Indian painting from Malwa it has two parts to it, and those two parts are very similar to the two sides of the Boston hydria. And also, just to reiterate, the long strides of Ravan indicate long distance travel in a very short period of time and continuous movement towards a destination, as we see on the reverse side of the Boston hydria. We've looked at the Etruscan depictions of the golden deer episode, and we've also looked at Indian depictions of the golden deer episode. So I just wanted to briefly give you a sample of the Southeast Asian depictions of the golden deer episode. On the left side, you'll see Ravan, who is known as Totsakan in Laos. He's again abducting Sita with his arm firmly around her waist, just like the satyr in the Caeretan hydria in Boston. So this is a gilded wooden panel from Luang Prabang in Laos, and Sita is known as Nang Sida, and Ravan is known as Totsakan. But the iconography is pretty much identical. And on the right side, we have Rama eyeing the golden deer, which is twisting its head to look back at the pursuer again. And this is from the National Library in Bangkok, Thailand. So now moving on from the Caeretan hydria number 2 and the deer hunt and the abduction scene, I just want to get back to a more high-level understanding of the Caeretan hydriae themselves. So I'm going to examine the purpose behind them in the first place. And according to the author Hemmelrich, he discusses many of these things, and he remarks that regarding the ornaments on the hydriae, he believes that the lotus palmettes derive from East Greek architecture and therefore belong to a sphere of solemnity. Thus, Hemmelrich realizes that they do have a serious and dignified purpose and a sacred value, but they also, as we will see, have a entertainment value for humor as well. Another comment made by Conrad Schauenberg is that the painted imagery, not the pottery itself, is what distinguishes the Caeretan hydria. And he says that the Caeretan hydriae are not nearly as good in pottery as they are in painting. It is all the more remarkable that, given their form, they can be considered unmistakably original creations. And I think that it's not just the pottery itself or the painted imagery itself that's original, but it's also the subject matter. And that's what Hemmelrich gets to in the next point. He says that the narrative themes of the hydriae are bewilderingly numerous. The painter, formerly the hydriae were believed to be the work of one painter only, but now two, has been described by Webster in 1928 as a great comic descriptive artist. He likes seeing somebody done in, and it is true. Catching and killing an enemy or victim is one of the main subjects on the hydriae. So, in this one, Hemmelrich recognizes that there are numerous themes, and that they can't just be all included in the purview of Greek mythology. And he also, hints at the fact that this is not just for serious purpose, but also for comic description. And that's what we see in the abduction of Sita as well as the deer hunt. He's highlighting the futility of their deer hunt and indicating that they're being done in. That both Rama and Lakshmana and Sita are being done in. And, the catching of Sita by Ravan is definitely one of the major subjects. That is the abduction. The next point is that I'm trying to make is that the Caeretan hydria number 2 is thus related to the Campana slabs, but the latter, meaning the Campana slabs, have a more solemn religious tone. They're more serious and kind of sacred in their importance, but and they might have some value for what you would call salvation or liberation, but the former work of art, that is the hydria, is meant more for entertainment and comedy. In his book, more on the Caeretan hydriae, addenda and clarifications, Jaap Hemmelrich makes an important observation. He says that regarding the purpose of the hydriae, they were made for storing water for ceremonial purification, both in private and public buildings. Such water served domestic and municipal rituals. Ritual water required special containers, special care, and cleanliness. It was to be used for all family rituals at birth, coming of age, marrying, death, and the countless lesser occasions for feasting and for cleansing during sacrifices. Such lustral water had to be kept apart from the considerable amount of water used in the household. It had to stand ready in ornate containers, such as the Caeretan hydria actually are. And he continues that and concludes that such containers of holy water should be decorated in a festive, rich way with scenes that are meaningful for all kinds of occasions, illustrating human life, human strife, tragedy, and comedy. And also, this is the most important thing, scenes pregnant of the superhuman, the mysterious world that transcends human life and understanding. And that's exactly what the Valmiki Ramayana is about. It's about uh, the superhuman dimension, and all the incredible interactions that Rama has with the Rakshas demons. And it definitely highlights human strife and tragedy, as well as comedy as well. So it's definitely a perfect topic for the artists who painted the Caeretan hydria. I would like to talk in more detail now about the Busiris painter, who has been called a great comic descriptive artist. His forte was presenting mythological conflicts in an amusing style and detailed manner. So, examples of his great work among the Caeretan hydria include the Boston Deer Hunt, number 2, that we've analyzed, Heracles fighting the Egyptians on number 34, and Alcyoneus the giant being attacked by Heracles, with Hermes witnessing and directing on number 21. What I have observed about this painter is that he enjoys the interplay between brute strength and stratagem, with Heracles and Hermes personifications of each, respectively, in the number 21 example. Now, in the number 2 example, Ravan is the satyr who is employing physical force or brute strength, whereas Maricha, meanwhile, is applying the stratagem of an illusory deer to decoy Rama in the Boston hydria. So, on one side, you see brute strength being employed, and on the other side, you see the stratagem or trickery. So, the Busiris painter, he likes how a cunning trick, coupled with violence, leads to corresponding misery for the victim, whether it be the shocked Alcyoneus on number 21 or the timid Sita on number 2 vase. So, and both of these characters are ambushed. You know, Alcyoneus is ambushed by Heracles, and Sita is ambushed by Ravan. And Sita definitely fits into the category of victims who, according to Hemmelrick, are the white Maenads done in by the big black satyrs. And so these are the characters who are done in, and that's what the Busiris painter, the comic descriptive artist, specializes in. And Hemmelrick further concludes that, indeed, for their tendency to caricature and their powerful way of putting across a story, the hydriae are, I think, the best examples of popular humor in Greek art. And also, Rama and Laksmana are also being done in by the Rakshas Maricha, disguised as the golden deer. So the doing in, the people being, the characters being done in are on both sides of the hydria. Rama and Laksmana on the front side, and Sita on the back side. So Maricha is disguised as the golden deer, and he leads them away from Sita, leaving her unprotected. So that way they are done in. And this theme of being deceived or defeated by one's recklessness or lack of forethought is thus emphasized on both obverse and reverse sides of the hydria number 2. And Hemmelrick only notes the latter example.